4:15 in the morning, the graveyard shift. This is the hour when the city and the casino are both holding their breath, waiting for the sun to give them permission to die. The air in New Orleans is always heavy, but in this pre-dawn drizzle, it's a living thing, a warm, wet towel pressed against your face. I was staring past the row of silent blackjack tables, through the atrium's ridiculously tall windows, the Palisades neon sign, a cascade of gold and rose pink, was melting onto the Mississippi. The river looked thick, like crude oil, swallowing the light without a ripple. The air inside was the usual mix, a chemical soup designed to keep you awake and spending. Underneath the industrial-strength disinfectant and the faint, citrusy tang of floor polish, there was the hum of the air conditioning, so low you felt it in your teeth, and always, the chime of the slot machines, that relentless, optimistic jingle-jangle win that was, for 99% of the people here, a total lie. I adjusted the sleeve of my crisp white uniform shirt. It was stiff, starched, but not stiff enough to hide the ache in my upper arm. A cluster of bruises, shaped like angry fingerprints, was blooming there, fading from a nasty purple to a sickly yellow-green, a souvenir from some lowlife who tried to rip my purse off my shoulder about a week ago. He got the bag with about $12 and a half-used tube of chapstick in it. I got the bruises and a renewed subscription to that cheap kickboxing class down on Magazine Street. I rolled my shoulders, wincing. Focus, Lena. Just another hour closer to paying Mom's latest round of hospital bills. That was the mantra. The bills, the class, the grind. At 23, I felt like I'd been grinding for a century. Sorrel. The voice cut through the slot machine haze like a dull knife. Gavin Pike. He didn't just manage the floor, he stalked it. A mid-level predator in a $200 suit that always looked rumpled. He had the kind of damp-looking skin that fluorescent lights love to expose. He didn't wait for my answer. He jerked his head toward the service corridor by the main cage. A word. My stomach did the familiar little dip it always did when Gavin wanted a word. I nodded, my face a polite, neutral mask. Sir. I followed him off the plush, patterned carpet and onto the cold linoleum of the back halls. We weren't heading to his office, with its glass walls and fake plants. We were heading to the linen supply hallway, a long, narrow canyon of metal shelves. The hallway was maybe 4 feet wide and 100 feet long. Metal shelves stacked to the ceiling with white towels, white sheets, and beige tablecloths. It smelled of industrial bleach and something else, something dusty and confined, like trapped air. He shoved the door open, letting it swing shut behind me with a heavy thud that echoed slightly. He hit the light switch. The single fluorescent tube overhead sputtered, hissed, and finally cast a cold, buzzing glare over everything. It was the kind of light that makes healthy skin look sick. He leaned against a stack of boxed napkins, crossing his arms. His smile didn't touch his eyes. Nice colors you're sporting. Sorrel. He nodded at my upper arm, where the sleeve had slipped just enough for the edge of the bruise to show. Picking up a side hustle? My blood went cold, then hot. The implication hung in the air, thick and foul as the river mud. He thought the bruises were from something else, something transactional. I got mugged. Gavin, I said, my voice flat, giving him nothing. Sure, kid, sure. He pushed off the boxes, holding a tablet and a stylus. He was all business now, which was somehow worse than the slime. Look, I don't care what you do on your time, but on my time, you cost us. He shoved the tablet at me. On the screen was a digital write-up. Procedural error, table 4. Last night, you forgot to verify the fill. The count was short $5,000 by closing. I didn't take it. I looked from the screen to his face. Gavin, I wasn't on table 4 last night. I was running chips, backup croupier. I didn't even push a rake until 2 a.m., and that was on 7. Maria ran 4 all night. The report says you signed off on the transfer. Then the report is wrong, I said, my voice flatter than I intended. I was too tired for this. Check the system logs. Check the camera feed for the shift change. I clocked out my drawer with Maria supervising and signing off. I was nowhere near that table's final count. His face tightened. The fake charm evaporated. This wasn't about the money. This wasn't about the table. This was about the no. I'd said no to covering a double last week. I'd said no when he'd asked if I wanted a drink after work 2 weeks before that. He was collecting no's, and this was the payback. He grabbed my wrist, the one that wasn't bruised, his fingers wrapped around the bone, his thumb pressing hard into the delicate skin on the underside. It wasn't just a grab, it was a vice. Listen to me. You little... He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, greasy growl. His breath smelled like stale coffee and nicotine. Every girl who gets hired here thinks she's special, thinks she's too good for the grind, but every girl softens up behind this door. You just sign the paper. Lena, we make this go away. You don't... He squeezed, a sharp, searing pain shooting up my forearm. It gets messy. You like your job. You like helping your mom. My heart was a trapped bird against my ribs. He knew about my mom. Of course he did. He'd signed off on the emergency leave. I tried to pull my arm back, but his grip was solid. Get your hands off me! Or what? He sneered. You gonna report me? Who do you think they listen to? The manager who's been here for 10 years? Or the backup girl with the side hustles? I glanced past his shoulder, desperate for an exit, for a camera, for anything. All I saw was the end of the hall, a dead end, marked by what looked like a dark, decorative mirror. It was supposed to make the narrow space feel bigger. It just felt like being watched. As I stared, I saw it a small, faint circle of condensation, right in the middle, like someone had just breathed on the other side. Gavin saw where I was looking. He laughed, a dry, cracking sound. Nobody's coming, sweetheart. It's just you and me. The mirror wasn't a mirror, it was a door. It swung open with a hydraulic shush that seemed to suck all the air, all the sound, all the buzzing fluorescent light out of the hallway. The man who stepped out wasn't just in the room, he commanded it. I'd seen him before. Of course. Everybody had. Dominic Vale, 34, maybe, and he was a ghost story the pit bosses told. The man who owned the Vale Consortium, which meant he owned the Palisade, the docks, and half the skyline. He wore a black suit tailored so perfectly it looked like armor. No tie. His white shirt was open at the collar. His dark hair was slightly damp from the rain. His shirt cuffs were rolled back exactly twice, showing a heavy, simple watch and strong forearms. His eyes, they were the color of the Mississippi at night, dark, deep, and hiding whatever was moving underneath. He looked at Gavin's hand on my wrist. He looked at my face. He looked at Gavin. His voice was quiet, not a shout, not a growl. It was a flat, cold line. Repeat that, I dare you. Gavin froze. His hand was still on me, but the pressure was gone. His fingers suddenly numb. He looked like a statue. 2 other men, dressed in the same dark suits but without the customized fit, had flanked the doorway. They were the kind of men you don't notice until they're standing between you and the air you need to breathe. They didn't move. They just watched Gavin, their hands clasped loosely in front of them. Dominic Vale didn't look at them. He only looked at Pike. He lifted his chin, just a fraction of an inch. Let her go. Gavin's hand snapped back like he'd touched a hot stove. He tried to laugh, a high-pitched cracking sound that died in his throat. Mr. Vale, sir, this is an internal staff matter, a simple misunderstanding. Lena was just signing a report. Dominic Vale's expression did not change, not a flicker. At the Palisade, he said, that same chilling calm. My internal matter is the safety of my people, and your hand was on one of them. I was breathing, too fast. My lungs felt starved. I instinctively rubbed my wrist, the skin already turning red and angry. I hated this. I hated this feeling. The hot flush of shame, the cold sting of fear, and now this humiliating wave of relief. I'd spent the last 5 years since Mom got sick making sure I was the one holding the cards. I took the mugging. I took the double shifts. I took the cheap apartment with the leaky faucet. I handled it. Being saved felt like being told I'd failed. But when his eyes, those dark, unreadable eyes, met mine, just for a second the script flipped. He wasn't looking at me like a damsel. He wasn't looking at me with pity. He was looking at me like an accountant finding a number that didn't add up. It was cold. It was assessment. It was recognition. And that, somehow, was more terrifying than Gavin's anger. He looked away from me, back to the wall, as if speaking to the air. Rhea. A woman I hadn't even seen stepped from the shadow of the doorway. She was all sharp angles and efficiency, dressed in a severe black pencil skirt and jacket, holding a tablet. "Pull the full night shift logs for Manager Pike," Dominic said, his voice clipped and precise. "Cross-reference camera footage from the chip vault in this linen closet for the last, say, 30 days. I want to know every time this door was opened after hours and lock his access, temporarily." "Understood," Rhea Calder said. Her voice was as sharp as her suit. She tapped the screen, her eyes already scanning data, and then she was just gone. She didn't walk away. She dissolved back into the casino floor. Gavin's face had gone from red to a pasty, sick white. The fluorescent light made him look green. "Sir, wait, you can't just, I have rights. This is a union floor." "I can't." Dominic took one step closer. Gavin actually flinched, pressing himself back against the towels. "I will let the Gulf Coast Integrity Commission see exactly what you can do in a locked hallway with a backup croupier. I'm sure they'll be fascinated by your management technique. The union will be the least of your problems." He turned his head slightly toward me, not a full turn, just an acknowledgement. "Your shift is over, Miss Sorrell." He knew my name. Of course he knew my name. The man who just stepped out of a secret mirror door. "Go to the infirmary," he continued, his tone softening by a single degree. "Get that wrist looked at. I will handle the shift change request." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a dismissal. But the weight in his voice, the cold command, was for Gavin, not for me. I nodded. Once. I couldn't find my voice. I walked past the two security men, who parted like a curtain, past the open door to the private observation room, a room I never even knew existed, and back toward the noise and the light of the floor. I was halfway down the corridor, the sound of the slots welcoming me back to the real world, when I heard Gavin, his voice shaking but still full of venom, mutter, "That little lying." He didn't get to finish. Pike. Dominic's voice. It stopped me cold. I paused, but I didn't turn around. I heard the scuff of his expensive leather shoe on the linoleum. He had stopped right under that flickering, buzzing light. "That last part," Dominic Vale said, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet. "The part you just muttered, repeat that, too. I dare you." Silence. A thick, heavy, absolute silence. Not even a breath from Gavin. I heard a small thump as something, probably the tablet, slipped from his hand and hit the floor. I kept walking. I could feel the cheap plastic of my name tag, Lena, trembling on the front of my vest, vibrating with the hammering of my own heart. I didn't look back, but I knew. I absolutely knew. He was still standing there, watching me go, not like prey, not like a possession, like an asset or a problem, or both. A thread had just been pulled, and I had a sick feeling the whole frayed tapestry of the palisade was about to come undone, and I was tangled up in it. The Mirador Suite is my sanctuary. It sits 3 floors above the casino, hidden behind the administrative wing. The name is an affectation, a relic from the hotel's previous owners. It's not a suite, it's a nerve center. There are no windows, just screens, banks of them glowing with a cool, blue light, reflecting data streams across the dark, soundproofed walls. The only sound is the quiet hum of the servers and the precise, near-silent tapping of Cade Morell's keyboard. Cade is my signals expert. He lives on caffeine and data, and he can find a whisper in a hurricane. Rhea Calder, my chief of operations, stood to my left, perfectly still, watching the main feed. She's the one who translates my intentions into action. The linen closet, I said, my voice quiet in the chilled air. Run it back. On the main screen, the footage from the service hallway replayed. I watched myself step out of the mirrored door. I watched Lena Sorrell walk away, her back straight, that cheap plastic name tag vibrating. I watched her until she was gone. Then, I watched Gavin Pike. I watched him deflate, the petty tyranny draining out of him, leaving a puddle of weak, terrified man. Pike is an idiot, Rhea stated. It wasn't an opinion, it was a fact. He's a useful idiot, I countered. He's predictable. He's also sloppy. I leaned forward, my hands clasping on the steel console. Cade, show me why Pike was so desperate to pin that $5,000 shortage on her. Cade's fingers flew, bringing up the chip vault logs, boss cross-referencing with Table 4's activity from last night. Data scrolled past, lines of code, timestamps, RFID authorizations. There, Cade said, freezing the feed. He highlighted 2 lines in yellow. Here's the official log, shows a $5,000 deficit at Pike's final count. But here, he pulled up a deeper log, the raw RFID scanner data. The chips weren't missing. They were swapped. They were replaced by ghosts. Ghost chips? Fakes, unauthorized. Non-value chips slipped into circulation, then cashed out for real money, a leak. It gets better, Cade continued. I pulled the slot maintenance schedules. Pike, or someone using his credentials, has been manually overriding the service cycles on 8 specific machines for the last month. The overrides coincide exactly with the times the ghost chips were introduced. The linen closet is the exchange point, Rhea said, her eyes fixed on a different screen. She brought up the thermal imaging feed for that hallway. It's the one service corridor without overlapping camera coverage, a perfect blind spot. For how long, I asked. 47 seconds, Cade answered immediately. Between the time the cage camera loses line of sight and the service elevator camera picks it up, 47 seconds every night between 3:05 and 3:10 a.m. Rhea pointed to a faint, residual heat signature on the thermal replay. He's not just swapping chips, he's swapping a container, something thin, metal. He takes the real chips out, brings the ghosts in. I looked at the screen, at the metadata. Miss. Sorrell flagged the discrepancy at 2:40 a.m., I said, thinking aloud. She didn't just note the short count. Her log shows she tried to cross-reference the slot maintenance schedule. She saw the pattern. That's why Pike cornered her. He wasn't just docking her pay. He was silencing a witness. My jaw tightened. He pulled her into that hallway not just to intimidate her, but to find out what she knew. The transport, I said. How do they move the chips off the floor? The cleaning code, Cade said, a note of admiration in his voice. It's sloppy, but it's clever. 3 false punches on the custodial time clock, spaced exactly 90 seconds apart. It's a signal. A signal for what? The dirty linen cart, Rhea answered. It's the mule. They dump the hot container into the bottom of the laundry bin. It gets wheeled out to the loading dock. No questions asked. Who has the laundry contract? Rhea didn't even have to look. Arcadia Maintenance. A shell. Peel it, Cade. His fingers tapped. 1 click, 2, 3. A corporate registry file popped up. A list of shareholders. Black Bay Circle. Cade read. The name landed in the room like a block of ice. Black Bay Circle. The investment front for Magnus Rowe. Rowe. The real estate mogul who'd been trying to push me out of the Gulf Coast shipping lanes for 2 years. He thought I was just a casino operator, a hospitality man. He'd miscalculated. Now he wasn't just playing with shipping manifests. He was stealing from my vault. He was putting his dirty hands inside my house. Sir, Rhea said suddenly, her voice sharp. She was looking at her own tablet. An email just hit the internal server, flagged by the protocol I set up around Miss Sorrell. It's from Human Resources. She mirrored it to the main screen. It was a non-disclosure agreement, subject professional conduct review. It was addressed to Lena. It offered her a resolution to the misunderstanding with Manager Pike. conditional on her signing an agreement to never discuss floor management policies or casino accounting practices outside of official channels. They were demanding she sign within 24 hours or face immediate termination, for I had to laugh disruptive behavior. "They're trying to gag her," Cade muttered. "They're trying to frame her," I corrected. "They're building a paper trail to discredit her after they fire her." "Block it," I ordered. "Quarantine the email. I want a trace on its origin terminal. That did not come from our HR department." Cade went back to the linen closet footage. He isolated the moment Pike grabbed her wrist. He zoomed in on Pike's face, the sneer, the quiet enjoyment of her fear. A cold, familiar anger settled deep in my stomach. Roe could play his games with money. He could try to leverage my shipping contracts, buy off politicians, flood my floor with fake plastic. That was business. But this was a red line. The casual, grubby application of force against a woman pinned in a hallway. It was a language I understood too well. It was the one tactic I never, ever tolerated. It was a personal insult. "We don't crush Pike," I said, my voice dangerously soft. Rhea and Cade both looked at me. Sir Rhea questioned. "He's a thread. You pull it, the whole rotten organization unravels. He's nervous. He's going to make a mistake. He'll lead us right to Roe's transfer point, Monteleone Dock. I bet it's Roe's territory, and it's the only deep-water dock not under my control." I turned to Rhea. "Miss Sorrel, I want her kept out of this. She's done her part. She's a civilian. She's not to be involved in the operational side." I paused, remembering the look in her eyes. Not just fear, defiance. Unless she chooses to be, I don't like owing people, and I don't like holding markers. I want to see what she does when she's given power, not just threatened with it. "Cade, lock Pike's account, but not a hard lock, a soft freeze, system maintenance. Make it look like an IT glitch, not a security lockdown. I want him to feel the walls closing in. I want him nervous enough to call his real boss." "And the ghost chips. Cade, how many are on my floor right now?" Cade smiled, a thin, wolfish expression. "Already on it, boss. I'm pushing a firmware update to every RFID scanner on the floor right now. As of 10 minutes ago, any ghost chip that passes a reader, well, it sings. It emits an ultrasonic note, too high for the human ear, but my system can hear it. We'll have a live map of every fake dollar on this floor by sunrise." "Good. Rhea, send a memo. Legal letterhead, effective immediately, all shift change protocols are updated. Dual supervisor sign-off is now mandatory for all table counts, no exceptions. And get maintenance, our real maintenance, to install new, high-intensity motion sensor lighting in that entire service corridor. I want it lit up like a football field. Kill the blind spot, permanently." My eyes drifted to a small, secondary monitor in the corner. It was a live feed from the staff infirmary, 2 floors down. Lena Sorrel. She'd apparently waved off the nurse. She was sitting on the edge of the examination table, her back to the camera, carefully and efficiently wrapping her own wrist with a fresh bandage. Her movements were precise, angry. She didn't look like she was in pain. She looked like she was preparing for a fight. The camera angle caught the dark, ugly bloom of the other bruises on her upper arm, the ones Pike had mocked. My hand tightened on the steel arm of my chair, the metal groaning faintly under the pressure. I watched her flex her newly wrapped wrist, testing the tension. Magnus Roe had just made a critical error. He hadn't just stolen from me. He'd shown me exactly what he was willing to hurt. I consciously uncurled my fingers, one by one. "Rhea," I said, standing up. The analysis was done. Now, the response. "Sir, tomorrow morning, arrange a coffee meeting for me with Miss Sorrel, 9 a.m., somewhere quiet, off-site." Rhea's eyebrow lifted just a millimeter. It was the closest she ever came to questioning me. "It's not a thank you," I clarified, reading her look. "She's a croupier who saw a pattern in the slot maintenance logs that my entire floor staff missed. She saw the sickness. I need to hear what else she sees." The text message had been brief and ridiculously formal. "Miss Sorrel, Your updated shift schedule requires an in-person review. Please meet at Rue du Sel, 9 a.m. It wasn't a request. Rue du Sel wasn't a Palisade property. It was a 24/7 joint squatting near the river, smelling of stale chicory coffee, old grease, and the dampness that seeped in from the docks. The rain was coming down in earnest now, blurring the windows, making the streetlights look like watercolors. I pushed the door open, a small bell jangling overhead, and scanned the room. I was here because of the shift schedule, not because of the man in the linen closet, not because of the fear or the adrenaline. I was here to get my hours, punch my card, and pay my mother's bills. I was not curious. I was not intrigued. I was on guard. He was already there, in a corner booth, the one with the cracked red vinyl, the one that looked over the river. Dominic Vale, in the flesh. Looked smaller in a diner than he did in his casino. He wore a simple, dark sweater, no suit. His heavy coat was hung neatly on the hook beside him. He looked up as I approached, his eyes just as dark and unreadable as they had been under the flickering, fluorescent light. A cup of black coffee was steaming in front of him. I slid into the opposite side of the booth, placing my small, worn notebook on the table between us. I didn't say anything. A waitress appeared, looking tired. "Coffee, hun." "Yes, please. Black." Dominic waited until she had poured the sludgy brew and moved away. He didn't mention Gavin Pike. He didn't mention my wrist, which was still neatly bandaged under my sleeve. He nodded at my notebook. "I read your report." My stomach tightened. "Which one? The one from last night?" "No," he said. His voice was quiet, making me lean in slightly to hear him over the rain and the clatter of plates from the kitchen. "The one from 6 months ago, the one about the auditory patterns of the slot machines on the mezzanine level." I blinked. I'd written that report after my first 3 weeks as a backup croupier. I'd noticed that a bank of 8 machines seemed to have a payout chime that was just a fraction of a second off-key, just before they went down for maintenance. I thought it might be a software bug, a potential tell for players, or maybe just something. I'd submitted it. Pike had probably used it for coasters. "You read that." "I read everything that has a pattern," he said. "You were right. It wasn't the software. It was the hardware. It was a signal. Someone was forcing a service cycle. You heard it before my tech team did." My hand, which had been resting near my cup, instinctively went to the notebook. I opened it. The waitress had left a pen. Without thinking, I flipped to a clean page and started to draw. "Pike's breaks," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. I sketched the main pit, the 3 tables he always hovered near. He takes a cigarette break every 90 minutes, but he doesn't go to the staff patio. He goes to the cashier's cage, northwest corner. "The blind spot," Dominic said. It wasn't a question. "Not a full blind spot," I corrected, sketching. "The high-def camera in the ceiling is supposed to cover it, but the new model Lucky 7 slot machine, the one they installed 2 months ago, the top light, the big decorative housing, it's polished chrome. Between 2:05 and 4:30 a.m., when they dim the house lights for the late-night vibe, that chrome catches the security spotlight from the bar. It creates a lens flare, a glare. It washes out the camera feed for about 3 feet of floor space, right where he stands. I drew a little starburst of light on the map. He stands there every single time, long enough to pass a note, or a key, or something else. He watched my pen move. He wasn't looking at me like a boss, or a savior, or a threat. He was watching me like a musician listening to a new song, trying to catch the melody. I finished sketching and pushed the notebook toward him. "You asked what else I saw." He studied the drawing for a long moment, then he looked up, his eyes meeting mine. The intensity was still there, but the cold assessment from the hallway was gone. It was replaced by something else, something focused. He didn't mention the bruises. He didn't ask if I was scared. He asked, "Where did you learn to endure like that?" The question hung in the air between us. It wasn't, "What did he do to you?" It wasn't, "Are you okay?" It was, "How are you so strong?" He was looking at the resilience, not the damage, and he was looking at my capability, not my victimhood. And God help me, That was more dangerous than any threat Pike had ever made. It made me feel seen. "You learn," I said, my voice a little rough, "when it's just you. You learn to brace. You learn to watch. You learn to see the patterns before they hit you." "I know," he said, and I believed him. Before I could process that, his phone, which was sitting face down on the table, buzzed once, a silent, vibrating alert. He picked it up. His eyes scanned the screen. His entire demeanor shifted. The quiet man in the diner was gone. The owner of the Palisade was back. He glanced up at me, his gaze sharp. "Pike is moving." He was speaking to me, but also, it felt, to the earpiece he wasn't wearing. Montelayan, brick-colored pickup. He must have been getting a live feed from Rhea. He looked at me, his face impassive, but his eyes were hard. "This is the part where the game changes. Miss Sorrell, this is the part where you have the absolute right to finish your coffee, walk out that door, and forget any of this ever happened. You can go back to your shift. Pike will be handled. You will be safe." I looked down at the mug. The coffee was almost cold. It was cheap. I thought about the new girl, Sarah, who just started in cocktails. Her hands had been shaking last night when Pike corrected her tray-holding technique. I thought about Maria at the blackjack table, trying to make rent, always looking over her shoulder. If I walked, Pike would be handled, but the system that made Pike possible would just find a new manager, a new dark hallway, a new girl. I looked back up at him. If I walk, who protects the new waitstaff? A flicker, a tiny, almost imperceptible softening in his expression. I'd said but the question had come out as He didn't smile, not quite, but the tension in his shoulders eased. "In that case," he said, "I have a proposal. It's a temporary assignment, a short-term contract, the Palisade Ethics Unit." "I've never heard of it." I said, "It's new," he said. "As of this morning, you'd be an independent internal auditor. Your job would be to observe, document, and report directly to me. You saw a pattern I needed. I'm betting you can see others." It was a job offer, a way to legitimize my presence, a way to give me armor. I picked up the pen again. "I have conditions." His eyebrow raised. "Go on." "1," I said, tapping the notebook. "I choose my own shifts. I work when the patterns happen, not when the schedule says. 2, I am never in a room, hallway, or closet alone with Gavin Pike. No meetings. No words, no exceptions. And 3, you said you wanted to protect your people. The anonymous hotline is a joke. It goes straight to Pike's old email. I want a real one, a secure one, run by a third party, and I want the number posted in every break room by tonight." For the first time, Dominic Vale actually smiled. It was a small, thin curve of his lips, but it reached his eyes. "Done," he said. He dropped a $20 bill on the table, far too much for the 2 coffees, and stood, grabbing his coat. "We're leaving." "Where?" "To work." We stepped out of the diner. The wind had picked up, driving the rain sideways. It was cold, the air thick with the smell of the river and wet pavement. He opened a large, black, old-fashioned umbrella. He held it over me, and the sudden quiet from the rain pounding on the silk was startling. The wind gusted hard, whipping my hair across my face and pushing the umbrella. I instinctively stepped closer to him, tucking myself under the center of the canopy, my shoulder brushing his arm. It was just a touch, fabric on fabric, but it felt like static electricity, a small, sharp jolt that was both warm and startling. I could feel the heat of him, even through his coat. A black sedan, sleek and impossibly clean in the rain, pulled up to the curb, the window rolled down, and I saw Rhea Calder at the wheel. She looked at me, her expression neutral, and unlocked the back doors. Dominic held the door for me. As I bent to get in, he paused, his hand on the door frame, the umbrella still shielding me. He was close. I could smell the faint, clean scent of his soap, something sharp and woody, underneath the smell of the rain. "Tonight, Miss Sorrell," he said, his voice low, "just for me. This is business." I stopped, halfway into the car, and looked back at him. His eyes were intense, holding mine. He was setting a boundary. He was being a professional. He had given me a choice. He had listened to my terms. He had not called me a victim. I gave him a boundary of my own. Tomorrow, I said, my voice just as quiet. Tomorrow might be different. A silent, charged beat passed between us. I slid into the back seat. He followed, closing the door and plunging the car into a quiet, leather-scented intimacy. Rhea pulled away from the curb without a word. Dominic sat beside me, not too close, but in the tight confines of the car, not too close was still countable. I could have reached out and spanned the distance between our knees with one hand. I kept my hands clamped around my notebook in my lap. We drove through the wet, gray streets. We passed the old Cypress rail yard, a place I'd always loved. It was a skeleton of rust and brick, covered in graffiti, abandoned for decades. I like this place, I said, mostly to myself, watching the ruined arches slide by. It's quiet, like a rest in a jazz piece, all that noise and then silence. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him turn his head. He looked at the rail yard, then at me. He didn't say anything, but I saw him file it. He filed away that piece of information, a random, useless fact about me, like it was a data point, like it mattered. It was the strangest, most unsettling feeling I'd had all day. He turned his attention back to the front. Rhea. Kate is on comms. Standing by, she replied, "Good." He looked forward, his voice all business again. "Here's the plan. We follow Pike to the dock. We do not engage. Cade will be tracking his truck in our proximity. We are ghosts. We observe the handoff. We identify the chain. We get faces, license plates, and we get out." He looked at me. "Your job, Miss Sorrell, is to watch and to remember. We're not breaking the rules tonight. We're going to use their own rules to close this." Rhea drove the sedan like it was a shadow. Sliding through the industrial district with the headlights off, Monteleone Dock was a graveyard of ambition. Rusting containers were stacked like mismatched blocks, looming against a sulfur-yellow sky. The only light came from high-sodium lamps that hissed in the rain, coating everything in a sickly, jaundiced glare. The air smelled of diesel, dead fish, and the deep, metallic tang of the river. We parked in the deepest shadow, between a stack of rotting tires and a chain-link fence. The engine was off. The only sounds were the rain drumming on the roof and the slap, slap, slap of water hitting the wooden pilings. Dominic sat beside me, perfectly still. He wasn't watching the dock. He was listening, a tiny, almost invisible earpiece in his right ear. Rhea had slipped out of the car moments before, vanishing into the rain like smoke. "Cade is patched in," Dominic said, his voice a low rumble that didn't travel past the dashboard. "He has eyes from the grain silo across the river, thermal and long range." Pike's brick-colored pickup rattled onto the pier exactly 3 minutes later. He parked badly, crunching the fender against a concrete barrier. He looked small, a nervous little man in a cheap windbreaker. He got out, looked around wildly, and popped his trunk. A white van pulled up. Arcadia Maintenance stenciled on the side. The driver, a guy in a white jumpsuit, got out. This must be Jax Dorn. He looked bored. Chewing gum, Pike, fumbling, pulled out a thin, metal box, a briefcase, almost, the flat container from the thermal scans. "He's handing it off," I whispered pointlessly. Dominic nodded, his eyes fixed on the exchange. "Cade sees it," he murmured. "He's scanning." A beat of silence. Dominic's eyes closed for a fraction of a second. "They're singing, the whole box. It's full of ghosts." My stomach clenched. It was real. A new sound, a faint crackle from the car's speakers. Rhea was on. "Got him," her voice whispered, filtered through static. "He's using a burner, but the frequency is open. Password Row Black Bay 47. Row, the name Dominic must have been expecting, the name Cade had found, Black Bay. Just as Dorn took the box, another vehicle arrived, a small, beaten-up laundry van, different from the Arcadia one. The driver got out, loaded 2 large, overflowing bags of linens into the back of Dorn's van, and took an empty, folded cart back. It was fast, a distraction, but I knew what I was seeing. "It's a blind," I whispered, leaning slightly toward Dominic. He turned his head. "What?" "The linens," I said, my heart starting to pound. "They're not just using the carts to move the chips out of the palisade. They're using the linen shipment to move them in." I was thinking fast, the pieces clicking together from my time in the service hallway. A casino goes through thousands of pounds of laundry. If you're Arcadia, you control the manifest, you just short the count. You say you delivered 500 towels. You only deliver 450. You hide the chip containers in the empty space. No one counts the towels. They just weigh the cart. They're using the linen count to mask the chip count. Dominic just looked at me. He wasn't watching the exchange anymore. He was watching me. The wind was gusting, rocking the car, and a draft must have come through the vent because a piece of my hair blew across my face, sticking to my cheek. He didn't move. He just watched, his expression unreadable, but his focus was so absolute it felt physical. It felt like a hand on my shoulder. It wasn't the way Pike looked at me. It wasn't the way any man had ever looked at me. He wasn't undressing me with his eyes. He was dissecting me. He was seeing the gears turn, and in that moment, with the rain hammering down, I wasn't scared. His stillness was its own kind of shield. "Rhea, you're clear," he said, finally breaking his gaze and turning back to the windshield. "We're dark." The sedan's door opened and closed so quietly I barely registered it. Rhea was back behind the wheel, her face damp from the rain. She started the car, the engine a low purr, and we slid backward, then forward, pulling away from the pier without ever turning on our lights. The handoff was complete. Pike was getting back in his truck, none the wiser. We were 2 miles away, back on the lit streets, before anyone spoke. "Cade," Dominic said, and the speakers crackled again. "Data's good, boss. I'm uploading the full audio, thermal and the RFID song to the Palisade ledger. It's encrypted, time-locked, indisputable." "Good," Dominic said. "Rhea, I want a package ready by morning. Send a formal request to the Federal Office of Regulated Analysis. 4A, Cooperative Surveillance Query. We are providing them with evidence of interstate financial irregularities. Keep the source anonymous. For now. They just need to watch. We point the camera. They provide the jurisdiction." I opened my notebook. My hands were shaking, just slightly, from the adrenaline. I started writing, not a transcript, but a timeline. The arrival times, the vehicle descriptions, the transfer of the flat box, the secondary transfer of the linens, the password Rhea had intercepted Row Black Bay, 47. I drew a simple diagram of the pier, showing the flow of traffic, just as I had in the diner. I finished as we hit the edge of the French Quarter. I tore the page out and handed it to him. He took it, angling it toward the light of a passing street lamp. He read it once, twice. "You don't just see facts, Lena," he said, his voice quiet. "You draw the path. You make the data tell a story. Most lawyers can't do that." He folded the paper and put it in the inside pocket of his sweater. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket, a text message. I pulled it out, frowning. Unknown number. My blood went cold. It was a picture, a grainy, low-light photo of my back, me in my jacket, walking away from the Rue du Sel diner this morning. The angle was from across the street. The text underneath read, "Don't play hero, little girl. We see you." I must have made a sound, or maybe I just stopped breathing. "What is it?" Dominic asked. I handed him the phone. He looked at the screen. His entire body went rigid, the warmth, the quiet focus gone, replaced by something glacial. He didn't curse. He didn't raise his voice. He handed the phone back to me and looked at Rhea in the rearview mirror. "Change of plans. They're not just sloppy. They're bold." His voice was flat, lethal. "Rhea, change her security protocol. Now. She's not going home." "The Delphine property?" Rhea asked, her eyes meeting his in the mirror. "It's clean. It's secure." "Take us there," he said. He turned to me. The ice in his expression receded, replaced by that focused intensity. They put a tail on you. That means your apartment isn't safe. My people have a location. It's yours for as long as you need it. A safe house, I said. My voice was a whisper. A choice, he corrected. You can go to the police. They'll file a report, or you can come with me, where I know you'll be secure. I looked at the phone, at the picture of my back. Then I looked at him. Okay, I said. I nodded. It wasn't just fear that made me agree. It was the sudden, undeniable realization that this man, Dominic Vale, was the safest place to be in the entire city. I wasn't being forced. I was choosing. We drove in silence for a few minutes, away from the quarter, toward the old warehouse district. Your mother, he said, breaking the quiet. She's at the recovery center on St. Charles. It wasn't a question. He'd read my file. Do you want one of my people to notify her? Let her know you'll be out of contact for a day or two? My throat tightened. Pike had used my mother as a threat. Dominic was using her as a consideration. The difference between them was a chasm. No, I said, my voice thick. No, don't. She doesn't need to worry. I'm all she's got. She just needs to think I'm working. He nodded once. Understood. Rhea parked in a dark gated alleyway behind what looked like an abandoned factory. A faded, painted sign on the brick read, Delphine's, the original New Orleans praline. The building was old, beautiful red brick, with tall, arched windows that were dark. It smelled like the air itself was caramelized, a faint, sweet scent of burnt sugar and vanilla. We got out. Cade was waiting for us just inside a heavy steel door. He looked even more tired in person, but his eyes were bright. He handed me a small, heavy key and a plastic key card. This is your apartment, he said, pointing up a flight of wooden stairs. Top floor. The door is reinforced steel. The key is for the deadbolt. The card is for the alarm system. No one else has one. Not even him. He jerked a thumb at Dominic. You control the access. Completely. I took the keys. They felt heavy. This was it. This was real. Thank you, Cade, I said. He nodded and disappeared back into the shadows of the warehouse. I looked at Dominic. He was standing at the bottom of the stairs, not making a move to follow me. His coat was damp from the rain. Get some rest, Lena, he said. He used my first name. It hit me like a small, warm stone. The apartment is stocked. Cade's unit is on the ground floor at the back. My office is below you. He gestured to a door I hadn't seen. I'll be right here. If you need anything at all, you press 1 on the intercom by your door. I stood on the first step. He stood at the bottom. The space between us was charged. He wasn't my boss. He wasn't my savior. He was something else. He was the man who had given me back my power, piece by piece. First the job, then the choice, now the keys. He held my gaze for a long moment, 1,000 unsaid things hanging in the air, thick and sweet as the smell of burnt sugar. Then he nodded, a final, sharp gesture of dismissal and of protection. I'm downstairs. I turned and walked up the stairs, the key heavy in my hand. The apartment was beautiful and empty. The wood floors were dark, the walls were clean, exposed brick, and the sheets on the bed were a high thread count white. Cade, or maybe Rhea, had stocked the fridge with water, eggs, and a small, perfect-looking brick of cheese. It was the safest I'd felt in 5 years. And I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, listening to the old building settle. The rain had softened, turning from a roar to a steady, rhythmic shush against the tall, arched windows, outside. The city power flickered. I could see the faint pulse of the streetlights, dimming and brightening, casting long, nervous shadows across the room. My body was humming. It was the crash after the adrenaline of the docks. It was the low, simmering fear from the text message. But it was something else, too. It was the vibrating, kinetic hum of Dominic Vale's attention, the feeling of his stillness beside me in the car, the knowledge that he was just downstairs. I was safe. I had the key. I had the alarm code. But my mind was still running, sketching patterns, replaying the sight of that flat metal box. I'm downstairs. I sat up. The clock on the nightstand read 2:17 a.m. Sleep was a joke. I was too awake. I felt charged. I slid out of bed. I hadn't undressed. I was still in the jeans and sweater I'd worn to the diner. I padded, barefoot, across the cold floor to the door. I unlocked the deadbolt. The snick of the mechanism was loud in the silence. I opened the door and moved out onto the landing. The wooden stairs creaked under my feet, but I went slowly. The air from the warehouse floor below was warmer, and it carried that same, almost impostu 17 in the morning. The apartment Kate had given me was quiet, clean and secure. The sheets on the bed were crisp. I could hear the rain lessen against the tall, arched windows, slowing from a downpour to a steady, quiet drum. I could see the city lights flicker, just once, a sign of the storm's passing. I should have been asleep. I was safe. I had the heavy key in my jeans pocket. I had the alarm code, which I'd set myself. I was, for the first time in as long as I could remember, completely, physically secure. But I couldn't sleep. My mind was still on that dock, watching the flat, metal box exchange hands. My skin was still prickling from the threat in that text message, and underneath it all was a different kind of tension, a low, vibrating hum that had nothing to do with fear. It was the memory of sitting next to him in the car, the knowledge that he was, as he'd promised, just downstairs. I was too awake. My body was thrumming with a restless energy that wasn't just adrenaline. It was autonomy. I had a choice. I slid off the bed, still in my sweater and jeans. I was tired of being cold. I walked, barefoot, across the polished wood floor. At the door, my hand hesitated on the heavy deadbolt. I had the key. I was in control. I turned it. The click of the lock opening was loud in the silent loft. I eased the door open and stepped onto the wooden staircase. The main warehouse floor below was dark, but not completely. A single, low-wattage lamp was on in the corner, illuminating what looked like an old foreman's office. The air was warmer down here, thick with that memory of burnt sugar. And something new, the rich, dark, unmistakable scent of brewing coffee. I walked down the stairs, my feet silent on the old wood. He was there. He wasn't in his office. He was in the main space, standing by a small, makeshift kitchen counter Kate had likely set up. His suit coat was gone, his dark sweater fitting him in a way that was simple and clean. His sleeves were pushed up to his forearms. He was doing something precise. He had a small metal filter of Finn sitting over a glass mug, and he was pouring a thin stream of hot water into it. His movements slow, deliberate, a ritual. He didn't look up as I approached. He knew I was there. "You couldn't sleep," he said. It wasn't a question. "Too quiet," I said, which was only half true, "and too loud. My head is busy." "I know the feeling." He finished pouring the water. The coffee began to drip, one slow, dark drop at a time, into the glass. It takes a minute for the adrenaline to clear. He leaned against the counter and finally looked at me. The focus was still there, that unnerving intensity, but the glacial hardness from the dock was gone. He just looked present. "You like jazz," he said, and it sounded like he was picking up a conversation we'd already started. I nodded, moving a little closer, drawn by the warmth and the smell. The old stuff. Davis, Coltrane, the stuff my father used to play. "What do you like about it?" "The space," I said, thinking of the Cypress rail yard. "It's not just the notes they play, it's the notes they don't play, the rests, the silence. It makes the notes that are there mean more." He watched the coffee drip. "My grandmother had a piano," he said, his voice quiet, reminiscent. "An old upright. It was in her parlor, always out of tune. It had one key, the G above middle C, that was broken. It was just dead. It didn't make a sound." I waited. "I learned to play on it," he continued, "and for the first year, I just played around it. I avoided it. I wrote my own little songs that never used that note." "You learned to play around the damage," I whispered. His eyes met mine. Then I learned to use it. I learned to use the silence of that key. It became the rest, the space. It made the rest of the music sound different, stronger. I understood. Perfectly. We weren't talking about pianos. We were talking about the hollowed-out parts of ourselves, the parts that had been broken by muggers or bad managers or mothers who couldn't stay. The coffee finished dripping. He pulled the filter off and set it aside. He'd already prepared a second mug. He picked it up and held it out to me. I reached for it. My fingers brushed his. The ceramic was hot, but the heat from his skin was different. It was a living, breathing warmth. Neither of us pulled away. My hand stayed there, just resting against his, the mug between us. The air in the room suddenly felt very thick. I could feel my own pulse, a heavy, slow beat in my throat. I watched my own breathing start to mist in the cool air, and then I saw his, a matching, steady rhythm. The sound of the rain outside, the steady drum on the tin roof, seemed to get louder, filling the silence. He didn't move. He didn't take his hand away. He just watched me. His eyes, those dark, unreadable eyes, were asking a question. It was a clear, silent, respectful question. There was no pressure, no demand. Just may I? My heart did a slow, painful flip. This was the antithesis of Gavin Pike. This was the opposite of being trapped in a hallway. This was an open door. I gave him my answer. I nodded, just once. A tiny movement, but it was everything. He set his own mug down on the counter. Very slowly. He didn't take the mug from me. Instead, he gently slid it out of my grasp with his other hand, placing it beside his own. Then his hand came back. Not to grab, but to offer. He held it, palm up, in the space between us. I lifted my own hand, the one he had just been touching, and placed it in his fingers closed around mine. He didn't pull me. He just held me, and then he stepped forward, and I stepped forward. We met in the middle. His other hand came up, not to my waist, not to my back, but to my shoulder. It rested there, a solid, grounding weight. My own hands found the front of his sweater. Balling the soft wool in my fists, I leaned my forehead against his chest. I could feel the steady, slow thump of his heart under my ear. We just stood there, for a full minute. It wasn't about desire. It was about reassurance. It was about two people who had learned to play around the broken keys, finding a chord that worked. It was about bracing for a blow and getting a shield instead. Then, I felt his thumb begin to move, tracing a small, slow circle on my shoulder blade. My breathing hitched. The comfort was shifting. It was deepening. I tilted my head back to look at him. His eyes were right there. The longing I saw in them was a mirror of my own. He lowered his head. It was so slow. He gave me 100 chances to pull away, to turn my head, to say no. I didn't. His first kiss was a question. It wasn't on my mouth. It was on my temple, right at the hairline. It was brief and warm and heartbreakingly gentle. My eyes fluttered shut. His next was on my cheekbone. "Lena," he whispered, his breath warm against my skin. It wasn't a name. It was a prayer. My hands unclenched from his sweater and slid up. Around his neck, I felt the tension in his shoulders finally release, as if he'd been holding his breath for an hour. "Dominic," I whispered back. Then his lips found mine. It was still a question. Soft, hesitant, asking for permission. I answered by pressing back, just slightly, and the question turned into a conversation. It was a slow, warm exploration. It wasn't the frantic, grasping kiss of movies. It was careful. It was discovery. Every touch was a call and response. His hand slid from my shoulder to the back of my neck, his fingers threading into my hair. I leaned into his touch. His other hand found my waist, holding me steady, drawing me closer until there was no space, no cold air between us. My back, which had been chilled all night, began to warm under the heat of his palm. I felt him take a deep, shuddering breath, his own body relaxing into mine. I shifted, turning my head slightly, and my bandaged wrist, which was resting on his shoulder, brushed his cheek. He stopped. He pulled back, just enough to look at me. His eyes went from my eyes to my lips and then to my wrist, which I still had resting on his shoulder. He lifted his hand and his fingers gently, so gently, traced the edge of the gauze. Then he leaned in and pressed his lips to the bandage. A sound, half sigh, half sob, caught in my throat. He wasn't kissing a wound. He was acknowledging a battle. He was honoring the fight. He raised his head, his eyes dark with an emotion I couldn't name. It was deeper than desire. It was understanding. "Slow," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Please." I needed to feel this. I needed to know it was real. A small, pained smile touched his lips. He rested his forehead against mine. "I want to remember all of it," he murmured. He was right. This wasn't something to be rushed. This was something to be memorized. He didn't lead me. We just moved. A mutual, unspoken drift away from the counter, away from the harsh light, toward the center of the old workshop floor where a large, worn Persian rug lay. It was a forgotten piece of the old office, steeped in the smell of sugar and thyme. Our coats, mine and his, were placed on a wooden bench, neatly, carefully. This was not chaos. This was deliberate. We sank down, not falling, but lowering ourselves onto the soft wool. The single lamp cast a warm, yellow glow, leaving the corners of the vast room in shadow. The rain on the roof was our rhythm. We lay on our sides, facing each other. He didn't try to remove my sweater. I didn't try to unbutton his shirt. This wasn't about that. He just held me. His hand stroked my hair, back from my face. My hand rested over his heart, feeling that steady, reassuring beat. We talked in whispers, about the dock, about the fear, about the way the city looked after a storm. And as the adrenaline finally drained away, replaced by a profound, heavy warmth, my eyes grew heavy. We lay there, fingers interlaced. He didn't make any grand, empty promises. He didn't say forever. He didn't say I love you. He just held my hand, watched my eyes start to close, and whispered, "Tomorrow will be your morning. Lena, I promise." It was better than forever. It was a promise of sunrise. I realized my body wasn't braced anymore. I'd been coiled tight for so long, ready for the next threat, the next bill, the next Gavin Pike, lying there, with my hand in his. I heard a truck backfire on the street outside. And I didn't even jump. I was safe, not just protected, safe because I had been heard. My breathing evened out, matching his. The old clock on the warehouse wall ticked, a steady, solid sound in the night, outside. Magnus Rowe and his ghost chips were still moving. The city was still wet and dangerous. But in here, in this pocket of burnt sugar and shared breath, there was a small, quiet center of peace, and for tonight, it was enough. I woke up to the smell of burnt sugar and silence. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I hadn't woken up to an alarm, or to the sound of my mother's coughing, or to the dread of a double shift. I'd woken up on a soft, worn rug, covered by a blanket that hadn't been there when I'd fallen asleep. He was gone, but a fresh mug of coffee sat on the counter next to a piece of paper. Not a note, a key card. When Rhea picked me up an hour later, the city was bright and washed clean by the storm. She didn't mention the night before. She just handed me a new ID badge. The plastic was stiff, official. It read Lena Sorrell, Internal Auditor, Palisade Ethics Unit. The Ethics Unit, I asked, testing the weight of it in my hand. "He created it this morning," Rhea said, her eyes on the road. "You're the first employee." She didn't take me to the main floor. She took me to the administrative wing, through a door marked Engineering, and into the Mirador suite. It was exactly as I'd imagined, cold, dark, and glowing with screens. Dominic was already there, in a fresh suit, watching a data stream. "They're moving," he said. Not as a greeting, but as a continuation of a conversation I'd been asleep for. Rhea moved to the main console. Arcadia Maintenance filed a priority work order. 4 a.m. this morning. They need to conduct emergency servicing on the 8 slot machines you flagged in your report, Lena. The ones with the off-key chime, I said. They know we're onto the leak, Dominic stated, his voice flat. They're not servicing them. They're trying to retrieve the ghost chips, to clean the floor before we can do a full audit. We can't let them, I said. We won't, Dominic dictated, his eyes still on the screen. Rhea, all staff memo. Effective immediately, I'm announcing the Palisade Fair Play audit. All high-value machine maintenance, anything touching a chip reader or note validator is temporarily suspended. Sir, Rhea countered, that's a hard block. They'll know we're onto them. Good. Let them feel the walls, and any maintenance that is approved, he continued, a cold edge to his voice, will be conducted under the live in-person supervision of the ethics unit on IT. He glanced at me. And under dedicated full-spectrum camera coverage. Let's see them try to swap chips with you watching them. Cade Morell's voice crackled over a speaker, disembodied. Boss problem. They just pulled the Arcadia request. Canceled it. They're spooked, I said. No, Dominic said, turning from the screen. They're pivoting. He tapped a key, and one of the giant screens changed. It wasn't a camera feed. It was a local news site. A high-gloss photo of Magnus Rowe, the man Cade had identified, all silver hair and expensive teeth. Magnus Rowe announces the guest list for his annual Save the Coastline charity gala. Dominic read, this Friday night aboard the Azimuth. A charity party, I asked. It's the laundry, Dominic said, the pieces clicking into place in his eyes. Why risk cleaning the chips on my floor when you can cash them out at a private, high-stakes event? Rowe invites 100 of his friends. They donate to his charity. Using our ghost chips, his organization gets $1 million in clean donations. And my vault is suddenly, officially, short by the exact same amount. He's not just stealing, he's washing the chips into tax-deductible cash. My new ID badge felt heavy in my hand. Then I need to go back to the floor. Now, as the auditor, if they're pivoting to the gala, they're still going to have to move the physical chips from the casino to the boat. I need to see how they're planning to do it. Dominic nodded. Go! Walking onto the casino floor was one of the strangest experiences of my life. I was wearing the same black pants, the same white shirt, but the new badge changed the air around me. The pit bosses, men who had looked through me for a year, now made eye contact. They nodded. Ma'am. The dealers watched me as I passed. It wasn't the warm respect of a colleague. It was the cold, wary respect of fear. I hated it, but I also understood it. It was armor. Then I saw him, Gavin Pike. He wasn't in the pit. They'd moved him. He was working the guest services desk by the lobby, a humiliating public demotion. He was straightening pamphlets. He saw me. His face, which was already pale and sweaty, went a shade whiter. He put the pamphlets down and walked toward me, his hands held up in a strange gesture of surrender. Lena, Miss Sorrell, look, he was visibly shaking. What they made me do in the hallway, that wasn't me. I was just following orders. They said it was just procedure. I didn't say a word. I just took out the small, leather-bound notebook that Rhea had given me. Who is they? Gavin. My voice was quiet, neutral. I can't, he stammered, his eyes darting around the lobby. But they're not like us. They're mean. I was just trying to keep my job. You understand, I've got a kid. I wrote it down, word for word. Claims following orders. Stated they are not like us. Seems terrified. Mentioned family. Thank you for your cooperation. Manager Pike, I said, my voice all business. I snapped the notebook shut and walked away, leaving him trembling by the pamphlet rack. I didn't go back to the Mirador suite. I went to a quiet corner by the sports book, took out my phone, and sent a text to the new secure number Dominic had given me. Gavin is singing. He's scared of they. He's trying to cut a deal. The reply came back less than 10 seconds later. Good. Keep him scared. He's more useful that way. The next 24 hours were a blur of strategy. The azimuth was the new battlefield. Rhea was back in the suite, her fingers flying. Our asset inside Rose Security just confirmed. Black Bay has embedded 3 men into the azimuth stage lighting crew for the gala. Lighting, I asked, sipping the bitter coffee Cade had sent down. A diversion, Dominic said. He was pacing the suite now. They're running the main stage event, the charity auction. They can trigger a blackout whenever they want. Under the cover of darkness, they move the chips. They swap the cases. It's a classic. I've already spoken to my contact at the GCIC, Rhea said, referring to the Gulf Coast Integrity Commission. They're very interested, but they won't raid a high-profile charity event on a hunch from a rival casino. They need soft evidence. Something that points to a specific active crime, not just a suspicion. Dominic stopped pacing. He turned to me. Lena, that's where you come in. My heart hammered. What do you need? You found the pattern in the slots. I need you to find the pattern in the staff app. He pulled up an application on the main screen. It was the simple, clunky interface we all used for scheduling, HR memos. And tipping, he said, anticipating my thought. Guests can tip staff digitally. It's processed directly through our payroll. It's clean, it's fast. You think they're using the app, I said, the scale of it dawning on me. I think, Dominic said, his voice low, that during that convenient blackout on the yacht, a lot of guests are going to be tipping the staff who are helping them move the chips. Huge amounts, in batches. It's another way to launder the money before it even hits the donation table. They'll categorize it as staff gratuities, and it vanishes. We need to find the account they're using. I sat at the console, I took the tablet, and I went to work. For 3 hours, I dug. The public logs were pristine. $10 here, $50 there. Nothing. It's not here, I said, frustrated. It's too clean. Cade's voice crackled from the speaker. Look deeper. Lena, look for the door that isn't a door. The mirrored wall, the side gate. I navigated away from the user-facing logs and into the app's developer settings. It was a screen I only knew about because I'd once tried to stop the annoying pop-up notifications. It was mostly just code, but buried in a submenu labeled beta_test_protocols was a single, inactive user profile. It wasn't named after a person. It was just a string of text, Artemis 47. Dominic, I said, my voice hushed. Look at this. Artemis 47. It has batch processing authority. It can bundle thousands of individual tips into one single transaction. It's a ghost account. Artemis, Dominic mused, stepping closer. Goddess of the hunt and the moon. Cade, I said, speaking to the air, can you check the password protocols for it? A few seconds of silence. Then, Holy Cade's voice came back, tinged with disbelief. You're not going to believe this. The password isn't static. It's on a cycle. It changes based on the lunar phase. Friday, I said, my blood running cold as I looked at the calendar on the screen. The gala. What's the moon? A new moon, Dominic said, his voice grim. Total darkness, of course. That's our soft evidence, Cade said, his voice suddenly electric. That's our tell. I can't stop the batch. They'd know we were in the system, but I can tag it when that Artemis 47 account activates. I can insert a single line of harmless junk code into the transaction header. It won't hurt anything. It'll just be a digital fingerprint, a harmless, out-of-place detail, something only we know is there. When the GCIC inspects the yacht's servers, they'll find a batch tip file with, say, a recipe for pecan pie in the metadata. That's it, Dominic said, a rare, thin smile touching his lips. That's our tell. Lena, you're going to that party. Rhea was already typing. An invitation will be messengered to the factory. You'll be on the guest list. Your job is simple. Observe. You are my eyes. You just watch the stage. When the lights go out, you note the time. You are not to engage. You are not to interfere. You are a guest. Rhea and I will handle the rest. Observe only. I repeated. I nodded. My hands were steady. But as I said it, I slipped my hand into my jacket pocket, my own coat, my own keys. I was not the girl from the linen closet. I was not going to be a passive observer if I saw anyone getting backed into a corner. We were walking out of the Mirador suite, back toward the main lobby. It was late afternoon. The casino was bright, open and filling with the evening crowd. Dominic was heading to a meeting. I was heading back to the factory to prepare. And he was there, standing by the main fountain, as if he owned the water itself. Was Magnus Rowe? He was older than Dominic, with a perfectly coiffed head of silver hair and a smile that looked like it had been carved from expensive soap. He saw us. His smile widened. He walked toward us. His steps unhurried, his eyes flicked to me, taking in my new auditor's badge, lingering for just a fraction of a second on the fading, yellowed edge of the bruises on my arm, which were visible just below my rolled-up sleeve. Dominic stopped. He didn't tense. He just became still. "Dominic," Rowe said, his voice smooth and welcoming, as if greeting an old friend. "I see you're diversifying your portfolio, an interesting choice in personnel." He was still looking at me. "But is she a good investment? You've always been sentimental. Veil, choosing to protect a single, bruised girl over your own profits." My face burned. I wanted to step forward, to show him the picture on my phone, to tell him what I knew. But Dominic made a tiny, almost invisible motion with his hand at his side. "Stay." Dominic looked at Rowe. His voice wasn't cold. It was calm, measured. The voice of a man stating an undeniable fact. "I'm not protecting her. Magnus, I'm protecting the principal. You choose to profit by humiliating the people who work for you, by breaking them in dark hallways." His eyes were locked on Rowe's. "I choose order, and I choose an order that doesn't build its foundation on the humiliation of the weak. You can't understand that, and that's why you're going to lose." The two philosophies hung in the air between them. Two kings on a chessboard. Magnus's smile didn't falter, but his eyes went dead. "We'll see, boy. We'll see who's weak when the lights go out. Enjoy the party on Friday. It's for a very good cause." He turned, adjusted his cuffs, and walked away, his expensive shoes silent on the marble floor. Dominic and I stood there for a long second. The noise of the slots, the chime of the bar, the chatter of the guests, it all seemed to fade away. I looked past where Rowe had been, out the massive glass wall that overlooked the Mississippi. The sky, which had been clear all day, was changing. A line of dark, bruised purple clouds was gathering on the horizon. The river was turning choppy, whitecaps starting to form. Rhea appeared at my elbow, a tablet in her hand. "The National Weather Service just issued an advisory," she said quietly. "That tropical depression off the coast just got a name, Helene, and it's tracking right for us. Expected landfall Friday night." Friday, the night of the gala, the night of the new moon. Dominic looked out at the water, his reflection staring back at him. "Magnus thinks he's bringing a blackout," he said, his voice grim. "It looks like the weather is on his side." "Or maybe," I said, looking at the reflection of the three of us in the glass, "it's on ours. It's hard to hide your moves in a hurricane." The azimuth was everything the Palisade was not. My home was a fortress of calculated, neon-lit efficiency. This yacht was a floating monument to excess. It was all brass railings, dark mahogany, and glass chandeliers that swayed nervously with the rising swell of the river. Hurricane Helene was close now, a screaming, invisible presence just beyond the windows, rattling the champagne flutes in their racks. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the low, anxious hum of people pretending not to be trapped on a boat in a storm. Rhea had provided the dress. It was simple, black and sleeveless, ending just at the knee. It was a uniform, just a different kind, functional. It allowed me to blend in while giving me the freedom to move. In my ear, so small it was hidden by my hair, was a tiny receiver. Testing. "Lena, 1, 2. Cade's voice was a dry, calm whisper in my head. "You read me." I brushed my hair back, a gesture that looked natural, and pressed the tiny transmitter disguised as a pearl earring. Loud and clear, Cade. I was on the mezzanine level, leaning against a railing overlooking the main salon. Below me, Magnus Rowe was working the room, his silver hair catching the light, his smile fixed. I scanned the crowd, my heart a low, steady drumbeat against my ribs. "Dominic is in position," Cade murmured. I looked up. Through the main atrium on the deck above me, I saw him. He was with a state senator and his wife, laughing, holding a glass of amber liquid. He looked completely at ease, a man at home among wolves. He looked like he belonged. He glanced down, his eyes sweeping the crowd, and for a fraction of a second, they met mine. He didn't smile. He just registered me. A fractional nod, so small it was invisible to anyone not looking for it. Game on. Below, a woman in a glittering red dress was on the main stage, the auctioneer, trying to sell a truly hideous abstract painting of a pelican. Do I hear 30,030 for this magnificent? The main stage lights sputtered. They flashed, once, twice, and then dimmed to about half power. A collective groan went up from the crowd. Magnus Rowe, from his position by the bar, made a show of angrily signaling a technician. "That's the test." Cade's voice came, sharp and immediate. "They're checking the circuit. Stand by. Lena Pike's system just lit up, and we have ignition. The Artemis 47 account is live. The batch is running." My pulse quickened. This was it, the soft evidence. "Confirm the tag, Cade." Confirming. A pause. I could hear his rapid tapping. "Got it. The tag is set. The transaction header for that entire batch now officially contains the string Loon N. They just signed their own confession. It's live on the server." My eyes weren't on the stage. They were on the perimeter. And I saw him. Gavin Pike. He wasn't a guest. He was staff. They'd dressed him in a white waiter's jacket, and he was clearing empty glasses from a table near the aft stairway. The humiliation was rolling off him in waves. He looked sick. He accidentally bumped into another waiter, a tall, bored-looking man I recognized instantly. Jax Dorn, the technician from Moneleon Dock. It was a perfect practice sleight of hand, a bump, an apology, and a keycard, sliding from Gavin's hand into Dorn's. I was too far away. A direct photo would be impossible. Obvious. I turned my back to them, facing a large, dark glass display case holding a model of the yacht. I lifted my phone, as if checking my makeup in the reflection. There. In the dark glass, I had the perfect angle. I saw Gavin's face, pale and terrified. I saw Dorn's hand close over the card. My thumb hit the button. Click! The screen flashed. I lowered the phone, turning back as Dorn disappeared down the service stairs. I'd gotten it. Two men in dark blue polo shirts, GCIC Marine Safety stitched on the chest, walked past me. They looked exactly as bored and official as they were supposed to. They were heading to the main bar. Rhea, who I hadn't even seen enter, was already there. A vision in a sleek, silver dress. As the inspectors passed, she stumbled, spilling her club soda. "Oh, dreadful," she said, bending to pick up a napkin. As she came up, her hand, holding the napkin, made a quick, sharp gesture in their direction. 1, 2, 3. A signal. The lead inspector's eyes flickered to her, and he nodded, almost imperceptibly, before continuing to the bar. All the pieces were moving. On stage, the auctioneer was building to his crescendo. And now, ladies and gentlemen, a very special presentation from our host, Magnus R. Click. It wasn't a flicker. It was an execution. The lights, the music, the microphones, the emergency floods, everything. The yacht was plunged into a profound, suffocating darkness. The collective gasp from the crowd was sharp, terrified. The only sound was the howling roar of Hurricane Helene outside, the boat giving a sudden, violent lurch. "We are dark," Cade's voice said in my ear, impossibly calm. "That's the window. They've programmed a 13-second delay on the emergency system. They are moving. I'm pinging the ultrasonic chips now." A faint, high-pitched sighing came through my earpiece, a sound I couldn't hear in the room. "Got them," Cade said. "They're rolling, aft, toward the service stairs." Wait. "What?" I whispered into my earring. "It's a decoy. The ultrasonic signal is a decoy. They're just rolling an empty cart. But the other one, I'm hearing it. The sound, the casters, Lena, they're not going aft. They're going forward." I heard it too. In the blackness, under the first few panicked screams, I heard the low, heavy rumble of industrial casters on a hard floor. And he was right. The sound was coming from the stage, and it was moving toward the bow, toward the front of the boat. They weren't moving the chips off the boat. They were moving the factory. I looked across the atrium. I couldn't see Rhea. I couldn't see the GCIC inspectors. They were all in the wrong place. I moved fast, my hand sliding along the cold brass mezzanine rail. I found a clear spot. With the nail of my index finger, I tapped on the rail, hard. "Tap, tap, tap, B, tap, 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 O, tap, 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 W." "Bo?" I repeated it. Tap, 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 tap. "Got it." Rhea's voice, suddenly breathless, crackled in my ear. "Forward, bow, on it." Just then, the emergency lights kicked in, not the main lights. A few dim, terrifying red bulbs that did nothing but cast long, demonic shadows. The panic started to rise. And that's when I saw the two kings on the board. Magnus Rowe was moving fast, pushing through the terrified guests, heading for the grand staircase that led down to the main salon floor. But Dominic was there first. He stepped out of the shadows at the base of the stairs, a dark, immovable object. He was blocking Rowe's path, and he was smiling. Magnus Dominic's voice cut through the noise. "Hell of a storm. Hope your wiring is up to code." Rowe, his face a mask of cold fury, tried to push past him. "Get out of my way, Vale. I have guests to see to." Dominic didn't move. He just tilted his head, that smile still in place. "Oh, I'm sure. But you must tell me that Save the Coastline initiative, does that include the parts of the coastline my shipping containers are currently sitting on? I'd hate to think you were fundraising against my interests." It was brilliant, a verbal, strategic, infuriating block. Dominic was holding him there, arguing about business, playing the charming rival, and with every second he held him, Rhea and her team were gaining ground. Rowe was trapped. He couldn't shove Dominic aside without causing a scene. He was sputtering. "You have no..." "Wump." The main lights blazed back on, blindingly white. The music roared back to life, a sudden, jarring burst of jazz. The auctioneer stood blinking at the microphone. Rowe shoved Dominic hard. "You'll regret that," he hissed, and stalked off. But it was too late. From my vantage point, I saw it all. Rhea was standing by a forward utility closet, one marked electrical. Pointing at a wisp of smoke, a small smoke emitter she must have planted, and shouting at the two GCIC inspectors. "Why, it's coming from in here," she yelled. "The panel must have shorted." The lead inspector didn't hesitate. He pulled the door open. Rowe was halfway across the room, but he froze. The closet was empty, except for one large, black flight case. The lock was unlatched. The inspector opened it. Rowe started to move toward them, his face impassive, but his eyes were dead. It wasn't full of chips. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, was a compact, high-grade RFID printer. Next to it were several clear sleeves of blank, white plastic discs, the rivets, the raw material. And beside that, a small, high-pressure dye sublimation press for the graphics. It was the factory. It was the source. Rowe was there in a second, his smile back, but it was made of plastic. "Gentlemen, please, be careful. That's just stage equipment. For the light show, highly sensitive." The GCIC inspector looked from the RFID printer to Rowe's face. "Stage equipment, sir, with the power surges we're having. I can't risk this. It looks like a fire hazard. We'll need to take this back to the lab, just to verify it's safe." He snapped the lid shut. A click of finality. He pulled out a wide roll of red tape and slapped a GCIC seized evidence sticker on the side. We'll be impounding this for safety. They started to wheel it out. My eyes scanned the room, and I saw him, Gavin Pike, and he was pressed against a far bulkhead next to a stack of champagne glasses. He was sweating so hard his white jacket was translucent, and I smelled it. Under the perfume, under the smell of spilled wine and the dampness of the storm, I caught the scent, that faint, acrid odor, hot metal, ozone. It was the exact same smell from the linen closet. My God, they weren't just storing the chips there. They were making them there, in my workplace. The linen carts weren't just the exit route. They were the delivery service for the raw materials. The path was complete. My testimony, the smell, the chips, it was all one single, unbroken line. As the GCIC team wheeled the heavy case past the staircase, Dominic walked by me. He was heading for the upper deck, as if to get some air. He didn't stop. He didn't look at me. He just leaned in as he passed, his voice a low vibration, for my ears only. You did good. My heart, which had been pounding like a drum, suddenly felt full. It was the first time victory had ever tasted like this. It wasn't relief, it was satisfaction. I kept watching. On the far side of the deck, I saw Jax Dorn. He'd separated from the technicians. He was near the rail, the wind whipping his jacket. He pulled a small black USB drive from his pocket. Oh, he was going to throw it. Overboard, into the Mississippi. A hand shot out and plucked it from his fingers. Rhea, she was standing there, holding a fresh cocktail in her other hand. She smiled at him. Drop something, she said, her voice bright. She held the USB drive up, examining it in the light. Oh, this looks important. Dorn's face was a mask of pure, abject terror. Rhea just smiled, a sharp, straight, lethal line. She slipped the drive into her tiny silver evening bag, took a sip of her drink, and walked away. The party was breaking up. The storm was too strong. Guests were being herded off the swaying yacht onto the covered pier. Magnus Rowe was standing by the exit, shaking hands, his face a mask of calm charity. He had lost his factory. He had lost his data. But he was still standing. We hadn't gotten him. The knot hadn't been untied. It had just been pulled tighter. The real storm, I knew, was just beginning. The morning after the azimuth was unnaturally quiet. The sky, scoured clean by Hurricane Helene, was a painful, brilliant blue. I was back at the Delphine safe house, standing by the tall, arched window, watching the city try to piece itself back together. I'd slept for maybe 2 hours, this time in the actual bed, but the adrenaline from the yacht still hummed in my veins. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was an unknown number, but not a threatening one. It was the main line for the St. Charles Recovery Center. My stomach clenched. I picked it up. Hello? Lena, baby. My mother's voice. It was clearer than I'd heard it in a long time. The fog of her medication and the deeper fog of her withdrawal seemed to have lifted. Mom, are you okay? Is everything all right? I'm fine. Honey, I heard something. One of the night nurses. Her cousin works the valet at the Palisade. It's all anyone is talking about. That awful party on the boat. That storm. She paused, and I could hear her take a shaky breath. They said you were there, and that your boss, Mr. Vale, he protected you. A familiar, hot sting of resentment rose in my throat. The narrative, the rich, powerful man protecting the little croupier. It erased everything. It erased the data I'd found. It erased the signal I'd tapped on the railing. It erased the choice I'd made. I closed my eyes. Mom, I said, my voice gentle but firm. I protected myself. I have good allies now. There's a difference. Oh, Lena, she said, but the relief in her voice was so thick it was almost tangible. Just be safe. You're all I've got. I'm safe, Mom, I said, and the words echoed in the quiet, sunlit room. I looked at the heavy deadbolt on the door. I am, I promise. We hung up. I stood there, shaking, caught between the old life of just surviving and this new one. There was a soft knock on the loft door, not Cade's quick, technical rap, not Ria's sharp, impatient one. This was solid, measured. I opened it. Dominic, he wasn't in a suit. He was in dark jeans and a simple gray Henley that fit him in a way that seemed personal. He looked tired. He was holding a large, grease-stained paper bag. I figured, he said, his voice a low rumble, that after a night of saving the coast, you earned a beignet, or 6. A laugh, small and rusted, escaped my throat. It's a rule. We're in New Orleans. It's a rule, he agreed, a small smile touching his lips. He came in, and it was different. This wasn't the wary, adrenaline-fueled night before. This was the morning after. This was domestic. We didn't sit. We stood by that same tall window, the light streaming in, passing the bag of hot, powdered, sugar-covered dough, back and forth. It was the most normal, and therefore, the most surreal meal of my life. I looked down at the street. The sun cast a long, hard shadow from the building across the way, splitting the sidewalk in half. I keep thinking about the blind spots, I said, the words surprising me. He stopped, a beignet halfway to his mouth. What do you mean? The linen closet, the glare on the camera from the slot machine, even on the yacht. They use the darkness. I looked at him. It's the dark hallways I'm afraid of, the places without a camera, the places where no one is listening. He was quiet for a long time, watching the street below. The powdered sugar on his fingers seemed out of place, too soft for the sudden hardness in his expression. Magnus called me sentimental, he said, his voice flat. He was right. He set the bag down on the counter. My red line, the one Pike crossed, it's not just a principle, Lena, it's a memorial. He leaned his shoulder against the brick wall. About 10 years ago, before I had the Palisade, I was running a much smaller club upriver. I had this dealer. Her name was Sarah. She was smart. She saw patterns, too. And she had a floor manager, just like Pike, a petty bully who liked to use his authority in corners. He liked the supply closets. He liked the stairwells. His knuckles were white as he gripped the window frame. She reported him, he said, his voice a dead, cold calm. Twice. To HR. They handled it. They told her she was being oversensitive. They told him to tone it down, and the third time, she didn't file a report. The silence in the room was heavy, thick as the chicory coffee he was clearly craving. They found her in her car 2 days later, an accidental overdose. She left a note. It just said I told them. No one was listening. He turned from the window to look at me, and the raw, unshielded pain in his eyes was staggering. It wasn't the look of a boss or a mafia chief. It was the look of a man who had failed. When I was in the Mirador, watching that feed when I saw Pike put his hand on you, in that hallway when I saw you brace yourself for it, I wasn't just seeing you. Lena, I was seeing her, and I swore to God I would tear the whole building down before I let that happen again. My breath caught. It wasn't just my fight, it was his. He wasn't saving me. He was avenging her. This whole complex, high-stakes game, it was all built on the foundation of a single, ignored woman. I stepped forward. I didn't think about it. I put my hand, the one still dusted with sugar, on his arm. His muscles were rock hard under the cotton. "You're listening now," I whispered. His eyes searched mine. The pain was still there, but now it was mixed with that same intense focus from the diner. He put his hand over mine, his fingers lacing with mine on his arm. He leaned in. I met him halfway. The kiss was nothing like the night before. That had been comfort, discovery, a question in the dark. This was a statement. It was slow and steady and sure. It was a promise. His lips were warm, tasting of coffee and sugar. His hand slid from my arm up to my shoulder, his thumb brushing my collarbone. My other hand came up to his chest, feeling the steady, solid thump of his heart. It was a kiss that said, "We are in this." It was a kiss that said, "I see you." It was a kiss that said, "We are the ones in the light." The moment was broken by the sharp, tactical buzz of his phone, not a ring, an alert. He pulled back, slowly. The strategist, the owner, clicked back into place. He read the screen. His face hardened. "Rhea," he said, and the single word was a gunshot. "Black Bay is running. They're pulling back. Rowe is moving his entire operation to a holding warehouse, Pier 9. He looked up at me, his eyes now cold and sharp. "And he's cleaning house. Rhea's asset inside the Arcadia crew just confirmed it. They're planning to take care of Pike tonight." My first vicious instinct was good. Let him burn. Let the rats eat their own. Dominic saw it in my face. "No," he said, shaking his head. "He's a monster, but he's our monster. Lena, he's the legal anchor. The GCIC has the azimuth hardware. Fora has Cade's data logs, but Pike is the human link. He's the only one who can put Magnus Rowe's voice in the same room as the crime. We need him. We need him alive, and we need him talking." But he's terrified," I said, my mind racing. "He won't talk to you, he'll just run." "Then we don't give him the chance." We were back in the Mirador suite. The screens glowed. It felt like my new home. "He's scared," I said, pacing the room. "But he's also greedy. He's arrogant. He thinks he's just getting fired, not silenced. When he saw me in the lobby yesterday, he was already trying to cut a deal. He was trying to save himself." I stopped. That's it. Dominic and Rhea both looked at me. "We don't go to him with a threat," I said. "We go with an offer. We don't send security. We send HR. We call him in for an exit interview. We offer him a severance package, 6 months' pay, in exchange for signing a new NDA. He'll brag. He'll think he's getting away with it. He'll talk." "A severance package," Dominic said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "Lena, that is inspired. Rhea." "The glass break conference room," Rhea said instantly. "Second floor, fully wired for audio and video, all legal for quality assurance. I'll have a GCIC agent in the observation room. It won't just be a confession. It will be a fully admissible, legally recorded deposition." 2 hours later, I was sitting in the glass break. It was the complete opposite of the linen closet. It was all windows, bright, sterile light, and expensive, uncomfortable chairs. Gavin Pike sat across from me. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. "Gavin," I said, my voice crisp, professional, my auditor's badge sitting on the table between us. "Thank you for coming. As you know, your management role has been made redundant. The Palisade is, however, prepared to offer you a generous separation package, 6 months' pay, full benefits." His eyes, which had been darting around the room, snapped to mine. Greed. Pure, pathetic greed. 6 months. "Yes, we just have to finalize the procedural review. For the file, we just need your version of the events surrounding the accounting discrepancies and the equipment at Pier 9. He started to sweat. I don't... "Just for the file, Gavin," I said, my voice patient, "so we can close the books." He broke. It was like watching a dam of mud give way. The greed and the terror washed out of him in a torrent of pathetic, whining words. It was Rowe. It was always Magnus Rowe. He made me through Arcadia. Jax Dorn, he threatened my kid. Lena, he had pictures. He was crying now. Fat, ugly tears. "I just moved the boxes. I just signed the logs I never wanted. I never thought they're meeting tonight. At Pier 9, to give me my final payment." That's what they said, my final payment. He was sobbing, a high-pitched, terrified sound. He didn't even realize he'd just confessed to his own murder. My stomach turned. I hated him, but I hated what Rowe had done to him, too. I pushed the box of tissues that was on the table toward him. "Take a minute, Gavin," I said, my voice soft. That one small act of humanity shattered what was left of his composure. He wasn't just talking to an auditor, he was confessing. He told me everything, the password cycle, the smell of the hot metal from the printer, the way they used the linen manifests. He told me the exact time of the meeting, 9 p.m. I let him finish. "Thank you. Gavin, HR will be in shortly with the paperwork." I stood up and walked out. I walked into the adjoining observation room. The room was dark. Cade was at a console, his headphones on. A grim-looking man in a federal-issue suit was packing a briefcase, and Dominic was standing by the window. He wasn't in a secret room. He wasn't behind a two-way mirror. He was standing in the light behind real, clear glass, watching me, bearing witness. He turned as I entered. He didn't smile, he just nodded, his eyes filled with a dark, profound respect. "Cade got it all," he said. The FORA agent snapped his briefcase shut. He looked at me. "Miss Sorrell, that recording combined with the azimuth data, we have probable cause, full state and federal cooperation. We're formalizing the joint task force. We're moving on Pier 9, tonight." Evening fell. The city was electric. The adrenaline was back. But this time it was different. It was the feeling before a victory, not after a fight. Dominic met me by the service elevator. He was in his suit again. "We have a few hours," he said. "Before it all breaks, there's somewhere I need to take you." He drove. We didn't talk. The city lights blurred past. We didn't go to the safe house. We didn't go to the Palisade. He pulled the car to a stop by a high, chain-link fence. I knew this place. The Cypress rail yard. "You said you liked the quiet," he said, coming around to open my door. We walked through a gap in the fence. The vast, ruined depot was silver in the moonlight. The graffiti on the old train cars looked like sleeping dragons. It was peaceful. He went back to the car, leaving the door open. He turned on the radio, the volume low, a scratchy, slow trumpet solo. All breath and bent notes drifted into the vast, open space. He walked back to me, and he held out his hand. "A rest," he said, his voice quiet. "A beat, before the song starts again." I put my hand in his, and we danced, on the dusty, cracked concrete, under the rusted steel arches, surrounded by the ghosts of old trains. I put my head on his shoulder. I could smell the clean, sharp scent of his suit, the wool, the soap. His hand was warm and solid on my back. My other hand found its way to his neck, my thumb resting just on the pulse point. Thump, 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 steady and strong. The song ended, replaced by static. We didn't move. I was leaning against him, his back braced against one of the cold, iron support columns. The contrast of his warm body and the cold, unyielding metal, it was everything. He didn't let me go. He just held me, his head bent, his breath stirring my hair. "It's the end game, Lena," he whispered into the silence. "FORA, GCIC, my team is already moving into place. It all happens tonight." He pulled back, just enough to look at me, his hands framing my face. His expression was dead serious. "When you corner an animal like Roe, he becomes desperate. When this knot finally tightens, he's not going to aim at me. He's going to aim at the person who tied it. He's going to aim for you." I looked him right in the eye. I didn't flinch. I thought of the linen closet. I thought of the azimuth deck. I thought of Gavin Pike's terrified, sobbing face. "I know," I said, "but I'm not as fragile as he thinks I am." A slow, proud smile spread across his face. It lit up his dark eyes. "No," he said, his voice full of something I'd never heard before. "You're not—" The dance at the Cypress rail yard was the last moment of quiet, the rest in the jazz piece, as I'd called it. When we got back to the Mirador suite, the song started again, but the tempo had changed to a frantic, pounding drum. "Boss, we have a problem." Cade's voice was sharp, cutting through the low hum of the servers. He wasn't looking at the tracking data. He was looking at a weather map. "Helene, she's not a tropical storm anymore. She just hit Category 1, and she just turned hard. She's coming right for us. Landfall isn't in 3 days. It's tomorrow night. Peak winds estimated at 8 p.m. Rhea was already cross-referencing. Intel from the dock workers. Roe's meeting with Pike, the one Gavin told us about, it wasn't a setup for tonight. It's for tomorrow. He's using the hurricane. He's chosen the eye of the storm to make his move." "Of course he has," Dominic said, his voice flat. He was standing by the main screen, watching the spiral of the storm, a green and red monster on the radar. Fora and the GCIC won't move in a 100-mile-an-hour wind. He's not just using the storm for cover. He's using it as a shield. He thinks he's untouchable. It gives him 24 hours, I said, my stomach tightening. What does he do with that much time? He starts a fire, Rhea said, her fingers flying across her keyboard. He's already started. A rumor just hit the employee forums. Anonymous post. It's bad, sir. Read it, Dominic said. It claims the fair play audit is a lie, Rhea said, her voice tight with anger. That the Palisade is using the ghost chip investigation as a corporate excuse to freeze the entire employee bonus pool. They're saying Lena is the one who recommended it, that she's a corporate tool brought in to cut costs. My blood ran cold. He was turning them against me. My people, my old colleagues. He was painting me as the villain, the exact thing I was fighting. He wants panic, I said, my mind racing. He wants to discredit me before I can testify. He wants the staff to see me as the enemy. How do we fight it? Dominic asked, turning to me. Why? We don't fight, I said, my resolve hardening. We answer. Get the word out, all staff meeting, main ballroom in 1 hour, all shifts, and Rhea, I need access to the real payroll ledgers, the unredacted ones. Dominic's eyebrows shot up. Lena, that's proprietary. You can't fight a lie with silence, I said, meeting his gaze. He wants to weaponize the bonus pool. I'll show them the whole damn thing. We fight him with a bigger truth. An hour later, I was standing on a low podium in the Palisade's grand ballroom. It was packed. Hundreds of employees, dealers, housekeeping, valets, waitstaff, all looking at me with a mixture of fear and betrayal. This was a mob in the making. I didn't use the microphone. I just spoke, my voice carrying in the sudden, tense silence. My name is Lena Sorrell. A week ago, I was a backup croupier, just like you. I know you've heard a rumor that I recommended we freeze your bonuses. A man I knew from the craps pit yelled, "That's what Pike did. We're not stupid." You're right, I called back, my voice gaining strength. That is what Pike did. That is what Black Bay did. They weren't just stealing from the vault. They were skimming your tips. They were siphoning your bonus pool to cover their tracks. Rhea, standing at the back, hit the projector. The real unredacted payroll ledger flashed onto the massive screens behind me. This is the lie they fed you, I said, pointing to a line item showing the fraudulent adjustments. And this, I pointed to the real, untouched numbers. This is the truth. This is your bonus pool. Safe. This is the money they tried to steal from us. The audit isn't to stop your pay. The audit is to protect it. A murmur went through the crowd. I saw the anger in their faces start to curdle into confusion. And then dawning realization. I didn't use corporate speak. I used floor speak. I showed them the numbers. I showed them the path. The fire wasn't just contained. It was out. I walked off the stage and straight into the Mirador suite. The grim-faced Fora agent was waiting for us. You stopped a riot, Miss Sorrell, he said, not sounding impressed. But you've also complicated my case. The raid on Pier 9, it's tricky. Because of the storm, my superiors are demanding a primary victim sign the warrant application, a civilian anchor. I'm the owner, Dominic said, stepping forward. My casino was defrauded. I'm the primary victim. The agent shook his head. Rose lawyers will paint that as a corporate dispute, a rivalry. They'll tie it up in court for a year. No, we need her. He nodded at me. We need the employee who was physically threatened and intimidated, the assault charge from the linen closet. We need the harmed party whose complaint triggered this entire investigation. We need you, Miss Sorrell, to be the legal face of this warrant. The room went dead silent. This wasn't about auditing. This was about painting a target on my back. Absolutely not, Dominic said, his voice a low, lethal growl. Find another way. I just stood there. I saw the linen closet. I saw the buzzing fluorescent light. I heard Gavin Pike's greasy voice. Every girl softens up behind this door. I was done being soft. I'll do it, I said. Lena. Dominic started, turning to me. I'll do it, I repeated, my voice hard. But I have conditions. I want a full medical team on standby. 2 blocks out, and this is an arrest, not an invasion. I want an extraction plan for everyone, including Pike. No one gets left behind, and no unnecessary force. We do this by the book, my book." The agent looked at Dominic. Dominic looked at me, saw the steel in my eyes, and nodded once. "You heard her. Those are the terms." As if on cue, Cade's console beeped. "Sir, we just got an encrypted drop. It's from Pike." Rhea read the screen, her eyes wide. "He's terrified. He knows the meeting tomorrow is a setup to silence him. He's offering a trade. He says the Pier 9 warehouse is just a shell. The real equipment, the mother safe, with the master ledgers and the original chip dies, it's in a stormproof sublevel. He sent the coordinates. He's trading the real prize for federal witness protection." "Agreed," Dominic said immediately. "Tell the feds to process the request. By the book. He's a witness now, not just a suspect." The plan was reset. We weren't just walking into a trap, we were walking into the vault. And then, the one phone in the room that wasn't supposed to ring did. Dominic's private line, the one that bypassed all of us. He picked it up, his face impassive, and hit the speaker. Vale. "Dominic," Magnus Rowe's voice, smooth as oil, filled the room. "A storm's coming, my boy. Terrible weather for a fight. Get to the point, Magnus." "The girl, your little auditor, she's spirited. I like that. But she's causing friction. Send her to Pier 9. Tomorrow night, send her to me, alone, and I'll forget this whole mess. Your casino is safe. Your bonuses are safe. It's a simple trade. Her, for your peace." My heart stopped. Dominic's voice was arctic. "You think I'd trade one of my people?" Magnus laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "She's not people. Vale, she's a pawn, and you're about to lose the board. Think about it." The line clicked dead. I was breathing, but my lungs weren't working. He doesn't know about Gavin. He doesn't know we want to go. He thinks he's luring me into a trap." "He is," Dominic said, his face a stone mask. "He doesn't want to talk. He wants you." Before I could even process the weight of that, my personal cell phone rang, the number from the recovery center. "Mom," I said, my hand trembling. It wasn't my mother. It was a nurse. Her voice hushed and panicked. "Miss Sorrell, this is Nurse Emily. Your mother is fine. She's sleeping, but something strange just happened. A man was here." "What man?" "He said he was from the Palisade Benefits office, checking on your mother's insurance. He was very polite, silver hair, an expensive suit, but Miss Sorrell, he wasn't asking about insurance. He was asking about your visiting schedule. He asked when you usually come, when you're expected." My blood turned to ice. "When I told him visits were restricted due to the storm," the nurse continued, he just smiled. "He told me to give this to you. He left a business card." "What did it say?" I whispered. "It just says Black Bay Circle." I dropped the phone. It clattered on the console. Dominic was across the room in a single fluid motion. "Lena, what is it?" "He was there." I choked out. "Magnus, he was at the center. He was asking for me. He was near my mother." The calm, controlled strategist I knew vanished. The man who replaced him was terrifying. It wasn't loud rage. It was a cold, absolute void. He hit his comms. "Rhea, execute protocol. Helios, now get her mother. I want her moved to the Delphine. Full security package. I want her surrounded by my people in the next 5 minutes. Go." He turned back, gripping my shoulders. I was shaking violently. "She's safe," he said, his voice a low, fierce growl. "I have her. He can't reach her. Do you understand me? He can't reach her." The rest of the day was a blur of grim preparation. The storm was no longer an obstacle. It was the backdrop for the finale. Rhea confirmed my mother was secure in the safe house loft, guarded by 2 of Dominic's best. Cade pulled me aside. "Rowe wants you there?" "Fine," he said, his eyes bright with a cold fury I hadn't seen in him. "We'll give him a ghost." He handed me a flat, lightweight vest, body cam, high def, Low light feeds directly to me and the Fora van. And this. He held up a simple silver chain with a small, flat pendant. It's not jewelry. It's a tracker. Low radiation burst. He can't scan for it. If you get separated, I will find you. Rhea laid out the plan. The storm drains. Pier 9 is old. The tunnels are 5 feet wide and lead straight to the river wall. The feds will secure the perimeter. We'll go in the back, quiet as water. Night fell. The city was screaming. The wind didn't howl. It shrieked, a high-pitched metallic sound. The rain was a solid, horizontal wall of water. The power grid was failing, plunging the streets into a flickering, apocalyptic twilight, lit only by emergency strobes and lightning. We were in the alley behind Delphine's, the brick walls soaked black. The team was splitting. Rhea and the GCIC team climbed into a heavy, armored van. "See you at the exit," she said, pulling the door shut. I was with Cade. Our vehicle was a nondescript utility van. Gavin Pike, wrapped in a blanket and shaking so hard his teeth chattered, was huddled in the back. Dominic was in his own sedan, the decoy. He was going to hit the front gate of Pier 9, draw their eyes, play the part of the arrogant owner Roe was expecting. He stopped me before I got in the van. The wind was so loud we had to shout. He pulled me into the shelter of the brick alcove, out of the direct blast. "Lena," he yelled over the roar. I looked up at him. His hair was plastered to his head. His suit was soaked. There was nothing left to say. No speeches, no plans. He just pulled me to him, a hard, crushing, desperate hug. It wasn't romantic. It was elemental. It was two soldiers, back to back. He pulled back, his hands framing my face, the rain and the wind whipping my hair into my eyes. He pressed his forehead against mine. "See you on the other side," he shouted. "See you on the other side," I yelled back. A flash of lightning bleached the world white, freezing us in that moment, two people holding on in the heart of a hurricane. He let me go. I climbed into the van. Cade slid the door shut, sealing us in a pocket of sudden, ringing silence. "All teams," Cade said into his headset, his voice calm. "Move." The van lurched into the flooded street. A sheet of corrugated tin roofing cartwheeled past our windshield, screaming like a banshee. My earpiece crackled to life. "Rhea, GCIC team is at the south perimeter. We are dark." "Gavin," Cade said, "talk to me. Where's the entrance?" "The blue crane," Gavin sobbed from the back. "By the blue crane. The tunnel, it's under the pier. Oh God. Dominic, status," Cade said. "I'm 2 blocks from the main gate." Dominic's voice came back, steady as a rock. "They see me. They're lighting me up." "Cade, Lena, we're on approach," Cade said. And then a new voice. A voice that shouldn't have been there. It crackled over our secure tactical comms. Smooth, oily, and amused. Magnus. He was scanning us. 2 minutes, Vale. The countdown was on. The world dissolved into a chaos of wind and water. Pier 9 wasn't a structure, it was a drum being beaten by the hurricane. Cade, Gavin, and I were in the storm drain, a round, metal tube slick with river surge. The noise was a physical weight. Gavin was sobbing behind us, a useless lump of terror. "Hatch dead ahead," Cade bellowed over the roar. He put his shoulder into it, and the metal disc opened. We spilled out into the sublevel. It was quiet, dry, and cold. We were beneath the pier, in a concrete bunker, and there, against the far wall, was the mother safe. It wasn't a safe. It was a vault, the size of a truck. "Lena the beacon," Cade yelled, unspooling a thin safety line. "Clip in. He's watching. I know he is." I clipped the line to my belt. The body cam Cade had given me was live. I scrambled up the small metal access ladder on the side of the vault. My fingers were numb. The steel was slick with condensation. As I reached the top, my hand slipped. A voice, not Cade's, Magnus's. It echoed from hidden speakers, amplified and amused. "The bruised girl," he boomed, his voice surrounding us. So brave and so very, very predictable. A sound, a low, hydraulic groan. I looked down. The walls, the concrete walls of the bunker were moving. They were sliding, activated by the trap, The room was shrinking. "Lena," Cade screamed, bracing himself against the closing hatch. "It's a trap." "He's trying to crush the vault and us with it," I yelled. I fumbled with the beacon, a small, magnetic disc. I slapped it onto the top of the vault. A tiny, green light blinked. Active. The walls were groaning, moving faster. The gap to the hatch was closing. Cade was yelling, but I couldn't go back. I looked up, a narrow maintenance shaft. A gap maybe 2 feet high. No time. I planted one foot on the vault, the other on the closing wall. I used the kickboxing training. I pushed off both, a desperate, flying lunge, and threw myself, shoulder first, into the darkness of the shaft. I heard the sound, a final, cataclysmic boom as the concrete walls met, sealing the vault and Cade below. I landed hard on a metal catwalk, my shoulder exploding in pain, but I was through. I was on the main pier level. The storm hit me like a fist. The world was horizontal rain and screaming metal. I saw Dominic. His sedan was 30 yards away, its high beams cutting through the deluge, pinning 2 of Rose's security men against a container. But Dominic wasn't charging in, a hero in a suit. He was stopped. He was standing at the edge of the warehouse, the wind tearing at his jacket. He saw me. He didn't run to me. He trusted me. He believed me. He just held up the warrant. He was shouting at the gunman. "The warrant is live. GCIC, you are obstructing a federal investigation. Stand down." He was fighting with the law. And then Magnus was there. He stepped out of the pier's main office, wearing a long, black rain slicker. He was perfectly dry. He was slow clapping. "No paperwork. Fail," he shouted, his voice laced with victorious mockery. "In a hurricane, I'm playing with the weather. You're playing with stationery." He was so arrogant, so sure he'd won. He didn't know. I pulled the small, waterproof receiver from my belt. The green light from the beacon I'd planted was pulsing. Steady, strong. "Cade." I whispered into my comms, my body cam pointed right at Ro. "Cade, are you okay? Did you get the coordinates?" A burst of static, then his voice, breathless. "I'm fine. The hatch held in the coordinates, Lena. The second that beacon went live, the GCIC task force had a satellite lock. They're not just on the move. They're here." Gavin Pike suddenly scrambled up from a different hatch, the one we'd used to get in, looking like a drowned rat. "I did it!" he screamed, running toward a group of men in federal rain gear who were just appearing at the end of the pier. "I helped. I showed you. You have to protect me." He was halfway there when Magnus moved, faster than I thought possible. Ro grabbed him. He yanked Gavin back, hard, using him as a human shield. He pressed a small, black box to Gavin's temple. Enough games," Ro screamed, his voice finally losing its oily calm, cracking with rage. "The trade. The girl, give me the girl, Vale, or I'll silence this little rat right now." This was it, the moment. I stepped out of the shadow. I walked into the twin beams of Dominic's headlights, the rain plastering my hair to my face. "He's right, Magnus." I called out, my voice clear, not shaking. "You don't want him. He's just a gear." I took another step forward. All his men. Dominic. The feds. Everyone was frozen. "You don't even want me," I said. "You just want the system to be blind again. You want the cameras off. You want the dark hallways." Ro stared at me, his eyes wide with confusion. "What are you talking about?" I lifted my other hand. It held a small, waterproof tablet, the one Cade had given me. "You want the data. You want the audit. You want the truth." I looked him dead in the eye. "And the truth is right here." I hit the large green send icon on the screen. What did you do?" he whispered, his grip on Gavin tightening. "Cade," I said into my comms. "Confirm." "It's live." Cade's voice crackled, now patched into the Fed's open channel. The entire unredacted audit, every file, every video, every Artemis 47 Guillaume transaction. It's on the GCIC public server. It's on the Fora mainframe. It's everywhere. Sirens. Not one, not two, a dozen. They weren't using stealth. They were the cavalry. An army of blue and red lights cut through the rain from both ends of the pier. The GCIC, the City Utilities Fraud and Regulation Team. 4A, they were here. Rowe looked panicked, truly panicked, for the first time. The lights, he screamed at his men. Kill the pier blackout now! He fumbled for his own remote. He hit the master button. And nothing. Except the single floodlight above his head, the one lighting him and Gavin, went dark. But the rest of the pier, every utility flood, every crane light, every security lamp blazed to life. The pier was lit up like a movie set. Cade hadn't just bypassed the grid, he'd inverted it. Rowe was standing there, holding Gavin, illuminated only by the flashing red and blue lights of the approaching army. Every camera, including mine, had him dead center. Dominic took a step forward. He walked out of the shadows, his suit soaked, his face calm. He walked into the center of the light, stopping about 20 feet from Rowe. He didn't look at Gavin. He didn't look at the black box in Rowe's hand. He looked right into Magnus's eyes. The wind died for a single, perfect second, a pocket of silence. "You were saying something. Magnus." Dominic's voice was quiet, but it cut through the storm. "Something about my bruised girl." He tilted his head. "Repeat that, I dare you." Magnus Rowe broke. It wasn't a snap. It was a crumble. He saw the agents. He saw the cameras. He saw the light. He saw me. He saw Dominic. And he knew. The game was over. His hand went limp. He let go of Gavin. The black box in his hand wasn't a weapon. It was a hard drive. His payment. His last piece of leverage. It fell from his fingers and hit the wet concrete with a dull thud. Gavin just sat down. He folded onto the pier and started to sob, his head in his hands. The 4 agents moved in. There were no shots, no struggle, just the heavy, final metallic zip of cuffs, the sound of the agent reading him his rights, his voice loud against the wind. "You have the right to remain silent." I finally let out the breath I felt like I'd been holding since that first night in the linen closet. Rhea was suddenly at my side, wrapping a thick, dry wool cloak around my shoulders. My teeth were chattering now, the adrenaline draining away, leaving me cold. Dominic walked over. He didn't pull me into a passionate embrace. He just stood beside me. He put his arm around my shoulders, solid and warm, shielding me from the driving rain. It wasn't possession. It was shelter. Our eyes met. His were dark and deep and proud. "It's over," he said. I looked at the agents swarming the pier. I looked at the broken, empty containers. I looked at Gavin, being helped to his feet by a medic. "No," I whispered, my voice raw. "It's not. Now the repairs begin." The morning was blinding. The storm had scoured the world clean. The news was a quiet explosion. Fora had opened the largest racketeering case in the state's history. Pier 9 was a federal crime scene. And at the Palisade, the work began. The first thing I saw when I walked onto the floor was the wall, the mirrored wall outside the Mirador suite. The one-way glass Dominic had stepped through, it was gone. In its place was just clear glass. His office was visible to everyone. He wasn't hiding anymore. He called me in. He slid a folder across his desk. It wasn't a severance package. It was a contract. "Head of Integrity and Games," he said. "It's a new position. You're the head of the ethics unit." Inside was another document, stock certificates, and minority shares, 5%. You didn't just save the house. Lena, you are the house. You earned this. I took it. I wasn't the girl who was saved. I was the woman who had signed the warrant. That night, I didn't go to the safe house. I went to the Cypress rail yard. He was already there. The storm had washed the old depot, too. The rust looked like gold in the setting sun. The air was cool and clean. There was no radio this time. He just held out his hand. I took it. We danced, slowly. No music, just the sound of the city coming back to life, the distant sound of a riverboat, pulling its horn. He held me, his back against one of the iron columns. I leaned my head against his chest. I could feel his heart, steady, strong. He kissed me. It wasn't the desperate kiss of the storm. It wasn't the questioning kiss of the safe house. It was sure. It was sunlight. It was a promise. "It's not a forever kind of promise, is it?" I whispered, my hand over his heart. He smiled, his hand tracing my jaw. "It's a better one. It's an every single day promise. We just have to keep choosing to stand in the light." I looked up at him. The city was still damp. The river was still flowing. And at the palisade, a new banner was being hung. It read, "Play fair, live decent." Our story wasn't over. It was just getting started. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We truly appreciate you spending your time with us. Where are you listening from? We'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments below so we can all connect. Please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. And if you enjoyed this, please support us by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.